All right. Hi, everybody. This is Miss Corey, and I'm going to go through Unit 1, Lesson 7 about the Bronze Age, Babylonia, Anatolia, Assyria, and cuneiform tablet analysis. All right. It loads. There we go. All right. Learning targets. I just want you to identify development and results of Bronze Age, identify basic characteristics of the Assyrian Empire, difference between primary and secondary sources, grammatical symbols, and how to analyze an Assyrian primary source, which will be at the end, and that will be your assignment for Unit 1, Lesson 8. All right, your job, you're going to watch the Ed puzzle, you're going to answer the questions. Any questions I ask you today will be in blue text. You're going to follow along with your study guide. Any important concepts I'm pretty good about putting in red, like red text. Of course, if you have any questions, you can email me or come to my office hours Thursday and Friday from noon to 1. Yes, I do read all your answers for this puzzle, by the way, and some of them are kind of funny, so I do enjoy that. Okay, so we talked about last time, we have the Stone Age, we have the Paleolithic, and we have the Neolithic. Now we're going to talk about the Bronze Age. Okay, so historians define the Bronze Age between 3000 and 1000 BCE, and it's kind of self-explanatory. It's when humans started to use bronze as a material instead of stone. All right, so with the Bronze Age, so different parts of the world started at different times. So in the Middle East, China and Greece, that would be about 3000 BCE to 1000 BCE. England, on the other hand, started about 1900 BCE. And the reason for that is England just didn't really have the materials for it, and they didn't have the technology for it. So the importance of the Bronze Age is it shows that civilizations had the furnaces, tools, and materials to create the bronze. So down here in the middle is a picture of like what an ancient furnace might have looked like. All right, first question. Where is bronze mined / found in the world? Yeah, that was a trick question. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. Bronze is actually not like its pure like own pure metal. It is made with tin and copper actually. So here's what tin ore looks like. This is what copper ore looks like. Ancient tin usually came from the Zagros Mountains, which is in the Middle East. Also, Southeast China and Asia had tin. And ancient copper, most of it was mined in Egypt, but there was also other smaller mines throughout the Middle East as well as China. So why would someone want to use bronze instead of stone? What do you think? Yeah, so kind of a hard question, but the answer is bronze is a lot sharper. You can make a lot sharper of an edge, and that's going to really benefit with farming tools, cutting tools, and also weapons. So here we have some ancient bronze axe heads, as well as some bronze swords. All right, so next question. You have copper and tin. What other material do you need to melt these two metals? That's right. You need some sort of fuel. So you need wood, right? Specifically charcoal, but that's made out of wood. But what happened if you're in ancient Israel and you have like no trees around you? Where are you going to get that wood? That's right. You're going to trade. And specifically, you're going to trade um, to get the wood from either Babylonia or Anatolia, which we're going to talk about next. All right, so here's kind of a map of what like the Middle East looked like back in 1450 BCE. We're going to focus in here on Babylonia right now, which is kind of this like dark pink color. All right, So next up, I have to confess, I know this pains me, but I am not doing Babylonia any justice, okay? You could literally spend the whole year talking about the Babylonian Empire. Um, so I am so sorry that we aren't going into really big, like, depth about it. But if you have any questions or want to talk about it, you can let me know, okay? I have a lot of resources about Babylonia. So again, we're going to talk about that dark pink area. So Babylonia, that's the name of the region in which the Babylonian Empire reigned. So that was from 1894 to 1595 BCE. Um, and the importance of the location is that it was between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. So not only are you going to get that silt like we talked about last week, but also you're going to get a lot of boat transportation. So the main city within the Babylonian Empire was Babylon, and it had about 200,000 residents. And this picture of these blue gates right here are called the Gates of Ishtar. All right, so Babylonia, they're known for many things. Here's just a few of them. You don't need to memorize these by any means, but things like large markets, trade between Western Asia, Europe, and Africa, detailed jewelry, like I have a picture over here. It was a walled city, which I'll show you in the next slide. Irrigated cropland, which I'll show you in the next slide as well. They're also known for the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is like really famous ancient text. If you ever want to read it, I do have a copy of it that's digital. I'll totally send it to you. Another thing is they had sewers. Yay! Um, they would also be the first ones to recognize what is now known as the Pythagorean theorem, which you probably remember from geography. Or not geography, geometry. There we go. Um, They also were the ones that created time division by 60. So the reason why we have 60 seconds in 1 minute, 60 minutes in an hour is because of Babylonian. And they also are mentioned in the New Testament and the Quran. So they're also a pretty big religious center. All right, here's some just quick pictures. Up here in the left corner, they had like hanging gardens. um, Babylonia or Babylon also had like the walled city, like you see here in this artist rendition, and you can kind of see like the irrigation running through it. Over here is the text of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and then in the middle here is what the Babylonians believed Gilgamesh looked like. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Anatolia. So Anatolia is pretty much what today we call Turkey. So the importance of Anatolia is where Asia and Europe meet. Now, in Anatolia, the most famous city of it is called Troy. You may know it because of the movie. And if you want to take my history through film class next semester, we'll be watching this movie. Um, they also have metal and mineral deposits, which of course are important for the Bronze Age, right? Um, they're really known for making their grapes, which means they can have wine. Um, they also made really high quality pottery because they invented the pottery wheel. They also did some other improvements to wheels for transportations. So the longer a wheel lasts, the farther it can go, which means more trade. Yes, they're also known for the Trojan horse, where they like shoved a bunch of people inside and like infiltrated like a city. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about just briefly a city called Assur, which was in the Assyrian Empire. Now, the Assyrian Empire spans a really long time from 2100 BCE to 605 BCE, but we're going to be talking about the older of the time. So the city of Assur is named after a god, the Assyrian god named Ashur. Um, it is located on the Tigris. That means that it's on a river, so it not only has good farmland, but also boat transportation. And it's the meeting point between Anatolia and Babylonia. Okay, so it's almost like the halfway point. So Anatolia, and specifically the city of Ashur, the city of Ashur. There's been metals from Anatolia there that have been discovered, also textiles made in Babylonia, and tin from Iran. So that's how historians know that it was a really important trade city. All right, so the city of Assur. The other thing, besides being like a really like big trade city, is that they had donkey caravans because that's awesome. So what a caravan is a group of merchants transporting goods on the back of animals. When you think of caravan, you probably think of camels, but it can be really any animal. And in the city of Assur specifically, um, men were like the only ones to lead these caravans. So if men were off with the caravans, who ran the trade businesses? That's right, it was women who did. Um, so men could be off in Anatolia for months or years, sometimes leading double lives. So how do historians know that these women ran these businesses while the men were off on their caravans and their like second lives? It's because the houses in the city of Assur are really well preserved within the dirt. And there's lots of cuneiform tablets, which I'll talk about in a bit, with letters to and from women talking to each other about trade. And this is the topic of the text that you're going to read for Unit 1, Lesson 8 assignment. All right, so what are cuneiform tablets? So cuneiform is the oldest known written language. It's about 2400 BCE. It kind of comes about. It might be even older than that. So the cuneiform symbols, they're like like what we would call today an alphabet. Here's a close-up picture right here in the center of what cuneiform symbols look like. And they weren't used for just one specific language, but multiple languages. Okay. Yeah, so their symbols were used like for multiple languages, but the same symbols. Anyway, another big misconception about cuneiform tablets is a lot of people think that they're gigantic. Typically, they're not. Typically, you can put them in about the palm of your hand or maybe a little bit bigger than that. So what they are, they're clay tablets used to write messages. Yes, papyrus was around during this time, but it was really labor intensive and pretty much only in Egypt. So that's where cuneiform tablets was the better method of like writing stuff down on. So what happened is that the people who make cuneiform tablets would just take like wetted clay and a stylus and they would just write. And then as it dries, it gets really, really hard. And then it can last for thousands of years. All right, so I'm going to switch topics real slightly here. So my first question for you is, what is the difference between primary and secondary sources? All right, so what is the difference? Great question. So usually a primary, or always a primary source is documented by someone who witnessed or experienced an event. For example, over here, like the soldier right here, okay? This is during Pearl Harbor. He's going to be like if he wrote down what happened during Pearl Harbor, he would be the primary source because he witnessed it happen. Like he knows all the details because he lived it. Um, on the other hand, there's secondary sources. So that's usually documented by someone who was interpreting the event. So that person did not have firsthand experience of the event. So, for example, like a kid listening to the radio about Pearl Harbor. Okay, so if he's listening to the news anchor who's talking about Pearl Harbor, that would be a secondary source because the news anchor probably wasn't there in Hawaii during Pearl Harbor. So the news anchor is interpreting the information he gets um, about the event. All right, so primary written secondary sources can be pretty much anything. They can be written, they can be on TV, they can be spoken, videotaped, artist represented, um, diaries, letters, memoirs, journals, speeches, manuscripts, interviews. Those are all could be primary and secondary sources. And we'll look at a few examples coming up. All right, so here's an example of a primary source. Declaration of Independence. It was written by the founding fathers themselves. They were there. They're the ones creating the new government of the United States. That would be a primary source because they are living in the moment. Okay, secondary source would be the book Martin Luther King Jr., a biography by Roger Bruns. Okay, that would be a secondary source because Roger Bruns is writing about MLK and he's clearly not MLK. Okay, so Roger Bruns is interpreting MLK's life through this book. All right, another example. So a primary source would be like, I went to the Mall of America today and saw Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. That's a primary source because you're living it, okay? You're seeing Harry Styles on that Ferris wheel. A secondary source would be, my friend went to the Mall of America today and saw Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. Because the person who's speaking is not the person who saw Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. They're interpreting the information from their friend. Sorry about that. All right, quiz time. So, which of these four sources would be considered primary sources? Okay, so you're going to tell me in the Edpuzzle. For A, that's the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. B is a news article about the death of Queen Elizabeth. C is a documentary about the Civil War. And D is an interview with Taylor Swift about her time at the Grammys. All right, so yes, A would be a primary source because Benjamin Franklin wrote the book. It's his autobiography. So he knows himself the best. It's about his life and he lived it all. B would not be a primary source. That would be considered a secondary source, just because the people who were writing this article about the Queen didn't know the Queen herself. They weren't there for her death. C, that's really tricky. Documentaries have primary sources in them, but typically there's like scientists or historians or other experts that interpret the information. That creates it to be a secondary source. But there are primary sources in documentaries. And D would be with Taylor Swift speaking about her time at the Grammys. That would be a primary source because Taylor Swift lived Taylor Swift's time at the Grammys. If you have any questions about this, please let me know because primary and secondary sources are kind of confusing. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about some grammatical symbols in historical texts. I'll try to do this as fast as I can. So if you're ever reading like a source and you're like, what the heck does the symbol or words mean? Here are some good examples. So if you're ever reading something and there's brackets and it says SIC, it means that the translator of the text is letting the reader know that there is a grammar mistake in the original language and the translator is intentionally leaving it as an error. So pretty much the translator is being like, hey, in the original text, this was written or like spelt wrong or written wrong. And I totally know that, so don't call me stupid because I know that. And I'm just letting you know that I know that by putting in the SIC in brackets. So for example, the two of us are going out to dinner tonight at Maynard's. Okay. So it's the wrong two. So like the translator would put in the SIC to tell like the reader, hey, I know this is spelled wrong, so don't call me stupid. I'm just leaving it as that, and I acknowledge that. Okay, next up we have the footnotes. So footnotes are usually where there's like a word or after a sentence, and there's usually like a little number above or below. That's just the author or translator wants to make a note about the subject being written. So the note usually then is included at the bottom of the page. So for example, he, one, is the powerful god of all of Greece, and all other gods are below him. And then at the end of the page, it would be, you would see that little one again, and then it would put in the footnote. So Zeus, the Greek god of the sky and the ruler of gods and humans. Typically, it's on the bottom of the pages. Sometimes it's at the end of chapters, which is really annoying. But for the most part, it'd be at the bottom of the page. All right. So other grammatical symbols, if you see the dot, 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 or the dot, dot, dot in brackets, that means that the original text is broken or missing, but historians don't know what words are missing. So this is really, really common with ancient stuff, because there'll be like a cuneiform tablet, and because it's thousands of years old, it could be broken. And the dot, dot, dot just means the historians don't really know what was supposed to be, like what words were supposed to be in there. For example, Yarim has ordered 3 jugs of dot, 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 payment in copper, dot, 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 received tomorrow. Okay, so if you just see brackets with words in between those brackets, so that's what the historians are saying, is that that's part of the original text is either missing or deformed, but historians can figure out what word should be there. So again, cuneiform tablets break, but using context clues, historians are pretty good at figuring out what words are missing. So for example, to the sleeping one who lay at rest, to him who would not arise from his sleep. So to him who is broken from the cuneiform tablet, but historians can figure out what was supposed to be there. Okay, so how to analyze a historical document. There are many ways to do this. If there's a system that you've used in history classes before or English classes, use it. So I really encourage you to underline and take side notes on concepts that you think are important or confusing. And then there's 3 questions that I want you to ask yourself for any historical document that you ever read. 1, who made the document? 2, who is this document made for? So who's the audience? And 3, what is the purpose of this document? What point is the author trying to get across? Now, 3 is a little bit of a hard one, and you might have to use your imagination or think deeply about that. And sometimes people come up with multiple answers, which is totally fine. All right, so we're going to do an example. So this is a quote from Abraham Lincoln during his presidential election. I'm not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I'm not bound to succeed, but I'm bound to live up to what light I have. So I'm going to answer my questions. 1, who made this document? Abraham Lincoln. Who is this document made for? So who's the audience? He is speaking to the voters during his presidential election. Okay. 3, what is the purpose of this document? At what point is the author trying to get across? So here's my interpretation of it. Lincoln is saying that he's an honest man, even if it means he won't win the election. He follows his morals and wants the voters to know that. All right, now it's your turn. So for U1 L8, so Unit 1, Lesson 8, you are going to do the document reading about women doing business in the city of Assur. There are 3 documents. You need to choose 2, just 2, okay? Answer the questions below each of the 2 documents that you have selected, and then submit the assignment on Schoology. Okay, if you have questions, let me know. All right, otherwise, see ya.